Hello, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Jim Lattis. I'm director of UW Space Place, and this is our April 2021 Eyes on the Skies program. UW Space Place is the outreach and education center of the University of Wisconsin Department of Astronomy. So we do these monthly programs in order to take a little tour of the current sky, in this case the spring sky that we have these April and May evenings, to get some idea of the sights that we can see there and what we can learn from them, and maybe some ideas about other events that are coming along. In this case, we'll mention the what's going on with the moon and a meteor shower or two, and I'll just take the moment now to mention that next month we'll be talking about a total lunar eclipse in May. So check back at the beginning of May for the May Eyes on the Skies for that. Well, as always with these things, I end up using some software which is called Stellarium, and you see Stellarium running there on the screen right now. I like to use Stellarium. It's a very capable program, really an excellent program for figuring out what and displaying what's happening in the sky. We often call it a planetarium program. I like to recommend it because it is a free piece of software that you can download from their home website, which is easy to find, stellarium.org, stellarium.org, and you can download it. It runs on Macintosh and Windows and Linux, and so pretty much any laptop or desktop computer that you have available will run Stellarium. Well, we're going to be looking here at some of the bright stars and constellations that we see in the evening these days in April now and early May. We're looking here at not quite 10 p.m. In the middle of the month, and as you can see, we're looking south there. Stellarium is labeling the cardinal points, the directions along the horizon for us. And right in front of us, as we're looking south, we have on the meridian, which is the line that stretches from north to south and directly overhead through the zenith, right on the meridian, we have the constellation Leo. Perhaps you see it there. So we have a lion on the meridian, and then up here, nearly on the meridian at this time, it'll be on the meridian in a little bit more time as it moves westward, is the Great Bear up here. So we have both Ursa Major, the Great Bear, and we have Leo, the constellation Leo, both on the meridian, as high as they'll get. We call it culmination when an object crosses the meridian. So basically, both the bear and the lion, the Great Bear and the lion, are near culmination these evenings, about 10 o'clock in the middle of April. You can find the constellations pretty easily in Stellarium because it will supply these lines that connect the stars that go with each constellation. So if you didn't recognize Leo immediately, then now you might recognize it with these lines connecting the stars there. And if you still want a little bit more detail, you can add the names, label the constellations there too. So now you see that I've thrown in the labels that we have not only the lion on the meridian, but we have two lions on the meridian because there are two lions as constellations. The constellation Leo, which we don't usually call Leo Major, although we could, and then Leo Minor, the smaller lion, which is right here in between Leo, the greater lion, and Ursa Major, the Great Bear. And of course, we call it the Great Bear to distinguish it from the Little Bear, Ursa Minor. So we have two lions and the bear on the meridian here before us, and again, easy to find with Stellarium. Most of us recognize much more quickly the Big Dipper. Now, at this point, we're looking almost overhead. If we started off looking south, we'd have our heads tipped pretty far back by now. So it's probably actually easier to look around to the north. That's easily done with Stellarium. I'm simply going to drag the screen around until we see the northern cardinal point directly in front of us, right in the middle of the screen, and there we are. So here we are looking north, and again, this is going to be very high overhead, but not quite directly overhead. We find these nights, we find the Big Dipper, which is just 7 of those stars in Ursa Major. I'll turn those lines back on just once again. Here you see the stars of the Big Dipper, those 7 relatively bright stars, but you see that there are other stars connected in here that make up the Bear. There's the Bear. So these evenings in April and May are when we're going to find the Big Dipper at about its highest overhead, and we're going to use the Big Dipper to help us find a few other things in the sky. It's very common, very typical to use the Big Dipper to help find the North Star. That's easy enough. Here are the 4 stars that make the bowl of the Dipper, and these 3 make the handle right over there. 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5, 6, 7 stars there. These 2 at this end of the bowl of the Big Dipper are called the pointer stars, because if you draw a line between the 2 of them from here's the bottom of the Dipper's bowl there, from the bottom of the bowl towards the rim of the bowl, and keep on going, it points you over at this prominent star, which is Polaris, the North Star. It's pretty obvious just from looking even at Stellarium, and it's certainly very obvious looking in the sky, that the North Star, once you've picked it out, is far from the brightest star in the sky. Here we're just looking at the North Star, and you can see off to the left the extremely bright star Capella. That is a little bit into the northwest at about the time we're looking at it now. And over here you can see one of the brightest stars in the sky, Arcturus. Right over here. Both of these stars vastly brighter than Polaris, so you can forget that old story that the North Star is the brightest star in the sky. It is, of course, special because it's always in the north, because it's very close to the north celestial pole, so that as the Earth rotates, it's the only prominent star in the sky whose position doesn't move perceptibly anyway, unless you're using a telescope or something, doesn't move with time. So it's always there in the north, and you can use it as a guide for that reason, hence the name, the North Star. Well, let's turn back now a little bit and look over into the eastern sky. So once again, we still have the Big Dipper in view right here. But the Dipper, because we've rotated around now our view towards the east, the Dipper's orientation has changed a little bit. We use the Big Dipper, in addition to using it as the pointer stars to find the North Star over there, we also use the handle of the Dipper to help us identify a couple of other prominent stars in the sky. If you follow the curve of the handle of the Dipper here, and you could think of that curve as an arc. It would be helpful if you do so. Think of that as an arc. The arc carries you over here to the star, which Stellarium is helpfully labeling, the star Arcturus. So generations of stargazers have remembered this as arc to Arcturus. And then if you keep on going, if you arc to Arcturus and then sort of follow the general trend around to the next brightest star that you find right over here, you'll find the bright star Spica in the constellation Virgo. So, of course, we always say arc to Arcturus and speed to Spica right there. Spica is in the constellation Virgo, and we'll look at Virgo a couple of times here in a couple of contexts here today. Arcturus is in the constellation of Boötes. So once again, we can turn on the constellation lines, and we might as well turn on the labels too, so that we get some extra context there. Here's the Dipper. We arc to Arcturus. Arcturus in the constellation Boötes. Boötes is in mythology is the herdsman, figure of a herdsman, and but what you actually see if you're looking for the stars that are grouped together in the constellation, I always think it looks like a kite. It's not a very good kite, but sort of a kite figure. At least that helps me identify the stars when I'm looking in the sky. And then it has a tail, the tail of the kite over here, and Stellarium draws in another tail over there, at least a tail if it's a kite. If we continue on over here to Virgo, the bright star Spica is in Virgo, which you've heard of course, because Virgo is one of the constellations of the zodiac. Virgo is an extended constellation of relatively dim stars, although once you've got Spica, then you're generally able to find Virgo. And Virgo is usually said in mythology to represent the goddess Ceres. She's some kind of a goddess anyway. That's appropriate because she's a big constellation, stretches across a large part of the zodiac. If you compare Virgo with other zodiacal constellations, for example, Libra right down here, or back on the other side of Leo, which we'll come back to in a moment, the constellation Cancer, those are small constellations. They don't take up very much space in the zodiac. Why is Virgo so prominent? Well, we don't really know, although historians think it may be because originally the zodiac was not divided up into 12 equal segments, but only certain constellations were recognized, such as Virgo, and so there were no constraints. Virgo didn't have to worry about bumping into Libra on the other side there. And so some of the first constellations identified along the path of the ecliptic, which makes the zodiac, some of those first constellations tend to be larger, and other ones then got squeezed in as people understood a little bit better the choruses of the sun and the moon and planets in the sky. Well, let's turn off some of the help aids over here and come around now to looking south once again. I started off mentioning Leo, but I didn't talk very much about Leo. Again, very prominent this time of the year in the evening sky. You find Leo by looking for this backwards question mark shape, like this. And then back here you can find a very nice right triangle, and that makes the hindquarters of the lion. And this is one of the ones where it's relatively easy to visualize, at least if you think of him this way. This curve of the question mark is the lion's mane, and this bright star here, which is called Regulus, is the lion's heart right there in his chest. And again, the triangle back here, the hindquarters of the lion. I don't emphasize that constellation art very much unless I think it helps with as a memory device. One example where it doesn't help very much is the constellation of the zodiac that's just in front of Leo, just to the west of Leo, right over here. I talked about this one last month as well, in part because I wanted to emphasize an object that's in it. This is the constellation Cancer, the crab. Once again, I'll turn on the constellation lines. And my point a moment ago, here's Virgo over here. Notice how far across the zodiac stretches. Look at the short segment occupied by Cancer right here. These constellations are far from equals in their dividing up of the zodiac. Anyway, Cancer the crab doesn't look too much like a crab, so I don't talk about the artwork very much either. If you're looking for the pattern of stars that are sort of connected, it might look like a letter X, if you like that, or it might look like two Y's joined together at their stems, at their roots. But either way, find something that works for you. The challenge for most of us is that these stars are relatively dim. You'll usually see the sickle, it's often called, or the backwards question mark of Leo, even under city lighting. But if the lights are bright, or if the moon is particularly bright and nearby, or if there's a light haze or something, it will be very difficult to see these stars in Cancer. So a lesser known constellation, partly because it's sort of obscure, sort of hard to find. Well, this is leading us over into the west, into the winter stars that we're very quickly losing, the stars that we've been seeing since last fall, really crossing the evening sky in the past months, and fairly soon disappearing from our evening sky. These are some of the most familiar constellations that we have anywhere. Orion, for example, right down here. Notice how low on the horizon, not even 10 o'clock here, and Orion is beginning to set in the west there. What we see immediately in front of Leo are the easternmost bright stars of the winter sky. There's this nice bright one here called Procyon, pretty prominent right now because it's beginning to be one of the few remaining really bright ones over there. Procyon, and Procyon is in the constellation of Canis Minor, the little dog. So once again, we have another one of these major-minor pairs. And the major pair is very low on the horizon down here. We're losing Sirius pretty soon. Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, in the night sky, in the constellation of Canis Major, the great dog. But so low on the horizon, it's going to be probably a little bit of a trick to pick him out. But Procyon here, Canis Minor, is pretty prominent, as are these two stars in the constellation Gemini, Castor, and Pollux up here in the constellation Gemini. But all of these stars are disappearing into the west, and along with them are the last bright planet that we have in the evening sky. Mars is disappearing along with them as they sink into the evening sky. What's really happening is the sun is proceeding eastward as it does during the course of the year. And so as the sun creeps eastward little by little, it comes closer and closer into this group of stars. And before very long at all, they'll be going down with the sun. We won't see them at all. And then we'll say they're gone from our evening sky. Not because they're gone, just because we won't see them because of the sunlight. We do have the moon over there. The moon is creeping into the sky once again. It's still a very young moon, and we're going to look at that in just a moment. But these days, in the middle of April, we have a very thin crescent moon, which is going to become more prominent and work its way quickly across the sky. Let's go back a little bit, though, because there's a part of the sky that I neglected quite a lot as we talked about these more prominent constellations. Leo here, and you remember the Great Bear was up there, and the Big Dipper, and the bright star Procyon, and over here Arcturus, and over here Virgo. But all through this large section of the sky here, we kind of didn't mention anything in there. Well, that's not because there isn't anything in there. It's because the stars in this portion, this more southern portion of our springtime sky, the stars here are not particularly bright, and so they tend not to be known very well, in part because they're hard to see in the city. Not only do the city lights interfere with it, but they're low on the horizon where the lights are typically much brighter than they are high overhead, and so it's hard to make out these stars very well. Let's let Stellarium show us what's over there. There are actually three fairly prominent constellations. If you live in a dark sky, they're fairly easy to pick out. The easiest one is the one that's just below Virgo. So remember, we arc to Arcturus and speed to Spica, and then there's Virgo. And then just below Virgo, south you might say, of Virgo, is a little quadrilateral. It's not really a square, is it? It's sort of distorted away from a square. It's pretty irregular, but it's a four-sided figure there. This quadrilateral is the constellation of Corvus, the crow. Corvus is just the Latin word for crow. And then just to the west is a constellation that is called Crater. So you think of craters on the moon, and craters are sort of bowl-shaped formations on the moon. Well, crater is an ancient Latin word for a drinking cup or a bowl. And here maybe you can sort of see the bowl shape right there with it's like a goblet, so it's sitting on a stem. Maybe you could think of it that way. Now the stars of Corvus are a good bit brighter, so it's fairly comparatively easy to pick them out. The stars of Crater are a little bit more of a challenge. And then stretching across a large bit of the sky, all the way from just below Cancer the Crab over here, starting here, and stretching along sinuous shape this way, is the constellation Hydra, the water snake. Again, a couple of these stars are bright, but following the whole chain is a good bit of a challenge for most of us when skies are bright. But there are the constellations that fill in the southern portion of the sky below Leo and Virgo and Cancer over here. So again, Hydra stretching along this way, more down like this, and crater right over here, and then the 4 stars of Corvus right there. So if you want a stargazing challenge, go to a dark site sometime when you don't have a lot of moonlight, and look over there in the south this time of year for those 3 constellations that occupy a good bit of the sky. Well, I mentioned the moon a moment ago. We have the moon coming along here, and in the middle of April, it's a fairly thin crescent moon because we're early in the lunar cycle. New moon was just a day or 2 ago. Let's zoom back out and take the focus off the moon, and what I want to do is talk briefly about the full moon. To get to the full moon, we'll advance time day by day until we get the moon over there on the western side of the sky early in the evening. So here we are on the 15th, and I'll advance it now a few days at a time. So the moon is becoming brighter. It's closer to first quarter now. We'll carry on a good bit further. And you can begin to see the shape of the moon there in the little tiny representation that Stellarium gives. But in order to see it clearly, you have to put the focus on the moon and then zoom in a bit. And there we go. There's our full moon of April on the 26th, 27th of April. When the full moon occurs, which is at the moment when the moon is opposite the sun in the sky, when it's 180 degrees away from the sun. So it's not really a day, it's a moment when that opposition, as we call it, happens. At the moment of opposition, the moon will also be only about 12 hours away from what we call perigee. The moon's orbit is not perfectly circular, and so it is closer at some times and farther away at others. When it's at its closest, we call that perigee. Any object that's orbiting the Earth, when it's closest to the Earth, we call it perigee. So the lunar perigee happens, it turns out, not quite 12 hours after the moment of full moon. And this has come to be known as a supermoon. There's no actual astronomical significance or clear definition of what a supermoon actually is, but the definition that tends to be kicked around is that if the moment of perigee and full moon, that is opposition, are within 24 hours of each other, then it's a supermoon. The significance of that is only that because the moon is relatively close, when it is close to full, it will look a little bit bigger in the sky. Super exaggerates the impression quite a bit because it's not a great deal bigger than at any other time. Any other full moon that's not near perigee, you typically wouldn't notice the difference in the size of the moon. But it is technically bigger and brighter. The brightness might even be the greater effect. A bigger and brighter moon near supermoon. So if that's interesting, then we have one coming up here for the full moon in April. So you can expect the full moon of April to be mentioned in the press as a supermoon, and also for those nights to be nice, bright, moonlit nights, like any time near a full moon. The moon is important in thinking about meteor showers, and we have a couple of meteor showers coming up here in the next few weeks. There's a particularly nice one that is called the Lyrids, because what's called the radiant point of the meteor showers in the constellation of Lyra. The Lyrids peak on or about the 22nd of April. And the fortunate thing this year is that the moon will at that point only be a couple of days past first quarter on the 22nd. So not quite as far ahead as I'm showing it here where the moon is full. But a couple of days after first quarter moon means that it will set in the evening well before midnight. And the best meteor viewing is basically midnight until dawn. So if you're interested in looking for Lyrid meteors, this is a good year to do that. Early in the morning on the 22nd of April, although generally these meteor shower peaks are spread out over a few days on either side of the technical peak, and so any clear early morning hours on either side of the 22nd should be good for meteor viewing. You don't really need to be able to find Lyra in the sky. You'll just want to set up something comfortable like a lawn chair at a dark site somewhere and watch for the Lyrid meteors, which are generally produce an hourly rate of maybe 18 or 20 per hour. You won't actually see that many unless you're very lucky, but that's still pretty good for a nice meteor shower. 18 to 20 per hour is a nice shower. An even more active shower occurs on May 5th, and that is the Eta Aquarids. The radiant point there is in the constellation Aquarius. That's a very nice meteor shower, but for us in Wisconsin, the radiant is fairly low in the south, but even worse, the waning moon by then, it'll be past, it'll be near last quarter, the moon will be. So it will actually be in the sky most of those prime early morning meteor viewing hours. So expect the Eta Aquarids not to be as good this year because of the full moon. Well, we advanced time here a couple of weeks in order to get out to the full moon, but I'm going to back up now and return to where we started here about the 14th or 15th of April, the middle of the month. And what we want to do is observe something that we're also losing, the winter Milky Way. I mentioned last time that these winter stars here, this glorious winter sky that we get every year, contains also the winter Milky Way. And so as these stars are going down in the west, the Milky Way too is going with them. So if we take a look here at what will happen during the course of the evening, let's advance time. We're back in the middle of the month now. Well, the timing is not too critical because you can adjust the time and the date back and forth. But we're going to advance the time an hour. And notice here's the Milky Way. Here are a few of these winter stars. There's the Betelgeuse in Orion, very low on the horizon, so Orion is nearly gone. Here we are at not quite 11 o'clock. If I go to midnight or nearly midnight, the Milky Way and those winter stars are practically on the horizon over here. The Milky Way is on the horizon, but look what's happening over on the other side, over here in the east-northeast. There's what we typically call the summer Milky Way, the other half of the Milky Way, which goes all the way around the sky. It's a great circle. The Milky Way is rising over on that side, the summer Milky Way. So sometime during this period of time, the exact period of time will vary on exactly what day you go out, but here in the middle of April, somewhere between 11 and midnight, the Milky Way will be as low, as close to the horizon as it can be. Now we live too far north for it to actually lie along the horizon. So there's always a little bit of Milky Way visible, usually up here in the northern part of the sky. But the closest approach when the Milky Way is coinciding with the horizon in the spring is about now, middle of April. And when that happens, we have, just as we started out talking about, we have the constellation Leo and we have the constellation of Ursa Major very high overhead here. The significance of the Milky Way being really low is that when we're looking toward the Milky Way, we're looking through the plane of our galaxy. And it's there that what we call interstellar extinction is greatest. That is, there's a great deal of matter in the Milky Way, clouds of dust especially, which block the light of different stars. And so the distance that we can see, if we're looking toward the Milky Way over here, the distance that we can see into the Milky Way is limited by that interstellar matter. The extinction, what removes the light from the line of sight, is greatest over there. Well, if we're looking then perpendicular to the Milky Way, which would be up here, that's where the extinction is least. And so what that means is that as we're looking in this direction, perpendicular to the Milky Way, out here towards Leo and the Big Dipper, that's where we have maximum extragalactic visibility. Sounds like a superpower, doesn't it? Maximum extragalactic visibility. We can see farthest through the universe out in this direction. Well, what is that direction? Well, it's basically this area from Ursa Major here over into the constellation of Leo over here, and into, let's turn on the constellation lines here. Ursa Major over into Leo over here, and down to Libra, and across Virgo and Leo here, and back over to Ursa Major. It's sort of this region of the sky. And this region of the sky used to be called the realm of the galaxies. Sort of a romantic kind of term. It's called the realm of the galaxies because when we look out in this direction, astronomers see a lot of galaxies, things that used to be called spiral nebulae before they understood what a galaxy really was. They were finding lots of these spiral nebulae out here. And we understand now that the reason you see lots of them out there is because the extinction is least in this direction. And so as you look out into the sky here, you see lots and lots of galaxies. And there are, in fact, huge concentrations of galaxies called galaxy clusters out here in the direction of Virgo, for example, is one of the biggest. These days they call it the Virgo supercluster of galaxies. There's huge amounts of matter out there distributed in galaxies. Well, to explore this realm of the galaxies yourself, you really need a telescope. This is not the sort of thing where binoculars, for example, will get you very far, and the human eye is certainly not up to the task, except for a couple of very bright galaxies. The best one being the Andromeda Galaxy, but we see that one in the fall. However, if you don't have a telescope, you can explore this realm with Stellarium. Here I've zoomed in just a little bit here. We're looking at Leo, and this is Coma Berenices over here. In Stellarium, you can turn on the switch that says Deep Sky Objects right here. And at first, we see actually what are a couple of globular clusters, which are really parts of our galaxy, and over here a couple of open clusters, which are also parts of our galaxy. But if we continue to zoom in a little bit, we'll begin to pick out some red ovals. There's another one down there. We take another step or two in. Let's skew off a little bit towards Virgo. Now we're talking. If you keep on zooming in, we see more and more of these red and orange ovals here. These are galaxies. These are the galaxies in the realm of the galaxies. You can see now why it's called that. They become quite thick. And although you would need a telescope to look at one of these, you can explore this part of the sky very handily with Stellarium. So let's take the oddly named Blow Dryer Galaxy. Now, these names are just something that astronomers have fun with. Here you see the catalog numbers. You would be able to look up this galaxy in any number of galaxy catalogs here by these numbers. But if you want to see it, Stellarium, for most of these objects, Stellarium actually has an astrophotograph attached to it. And all you have to do is zoom in on the object in order to get some idea of what it is like. And this turns out to be a beautiful face-on spiral galaxy. What in this case, astronomers would call this a grand design spiral, because it's such a symmetric and open spiral, easy to see the structure of this galaxy, which is a galaxy containing hundreds of billions of stars, like our own galaxy does. So you can use Stellarium to do some intergalactic exploration, and even if you can't go out and see these things in the sky, you can enjoy quite a bit of them in Stellarium with the library of photographs that it provides in there. So zoom in there, turn on the deep sky objects, and enjoy a few of those galaxies. And as always, thanks for joining us, and keep your eyes on the skies.